We talk a lot on High Performance about adversity, about what it takes to come back from the lowest moments of your life. Well, today's conversation is about a different kind of adversity. Young people who face illness, identity, and recovery all at once at the exact moment they should be stepping into life. My guests today are the legendary sailor, Dame Ellen MacArthur, Frank Fletcher, CEO of Ellen MacArthur Cancer Trust, and Josh Rands, who's been helped by their charity. Between them, they've lived every side of the story, and they know what it means to build something that genuinely serves other people. And we're here talking about the support that's been possible thanks to players of Postcode Lottery.
Never fear a storm.
Be ready to adapt.
The skill is staying true to ourselves.
I think maybe we should just begin with each of you giving us maybe 20 seconds about yourselves and why you find yourselves sitting in the High Performance studio today.
My professional life was sailing, and through sailing I met a French charity that took young people sailing and recovery from cancer and leukemia. And that day will stay with me for the rest of my life because it had such a profound effect on me. And as a result of that, I created the Ellen MacArthur Cancer Trust.
Brilliant. Frank?
So I've worked with young people in the outdoors for almost all of my working life, and then I knew Ellen many, many years ago before Ellen went around the world, and then we talked about the Ellen MacArthur Cancer Trust and I got involved, and it's been one of the greatest things in my life to be involved in this amazing organisation. So yeah, I'm incredibly lucky. I wake up every morning and I'm excited to go to work.
That's true high performance, right? Hey, Josh.
Hiya. So for me, it was about getting diagnosed with synovial sarcoma, which is a rare soft tissue cancer at the age of 19. And going through different forms of therapy and treatments to try and have a positive outcome. And then it was about meeting these great group at Ellen MacArthur Cancer Trust to then start rebuilding my life and refinding my confidence after nearly a year of quite a tricky time.
And mate, that rebuild is so fascinating. We're going to talk about that in detail. But maybe we should then begin, you've already mentioned it very briefly, the kind of moment where this entire journey started was you sailing with those young people. Take us back to that. It was year 2000, I think, wasn't it?
Yeah, so I was actually the first person we ever employed in my sailing projects years ago. This was back in probably 1998. Her brother had leukemia, and he had become involved with a French charity called À Chacun son cap. And that took young people in recovery from cancer sailing. And because I knew Marine and I got to meet her brother, she said, would I go sailing with this charity? And I remember going to France. It was in Brest, actually, my first time. There was a group of boats, all with young people on. And I remember going down there, and I jumped at the chance. I said, yes, I would. But as I got there, I felt really, really nervous because my French wasn't brilliant. These were young people that, I was in my early 20s. I'd never really worked with young people before, not as Frank has, for example. So that was a bit different for me. And these are young people who were in recovery from cancer. And I was so nervous. I thought, what am I going to say? How am I going to be with the young people? Am I going to be able to communicate with them? And literally within 5 minutes of setting foot on that boat, I was having more fun than I'd had in so long. They were amazing. They were such an inspiration. It was just an absolute joy and privilege to spend time with them. And it had such an effect on me that I kept in touch with many of those young people.
And were they young cancer survivors?
So they're young people who were finishing or had finished treatment.
Okay.
So predominantly post-treatment, somewhat, ongoing, but predominantly post-treatment. And they were just the epitome of bravery for me. And so I kept in touch with many of them when I went around the world the first time in the Vendée Globe. Lots of them came down from hospitals in France to the start. We had a competition designing a boat like mine, but the young people all painted the boats. They all came down to see that. I had a plaque on the boat with 100 of their names on, which I sailed around the world with. I communicated with them whilst I was at sea. And then when I came back, the last thing I did before I went to bed the day of the finish was to go on a coach with probably 50 kids from Strasbourg Hospital. And they'd come all the way from the hospital with the doctors and nurses to come and see me finish the Vendée Globe. Wow. And I went onto this coach to see them. And I'll never, ever forget that. It was the last thing I did before going to bed on the day of the finish of the Vendée Globe. It was amazing, absolutely amazing.
And what was it that you'd seen in these young people that moved you so much?
When you're doing what I did, you get asked lots and lots of questions. Yeah. Journalists, what's it feel like? All the time. And so many people say, you're so brave. You're so brave. And what I felt was, well, you're not. No, you're not brave when you choose it. If you choose it, that's not bravery. It's perhaps stupidity. It's a crazy thing to do, to go around the world on your own. There's a high chance that you might die. And, it's a dangerous thing to do. And if it's hard, it's kind of on your head, be it, because you wanted to do it. Those young people, they didn't choose it. They didn't choose it at all. And to go through something that you don't choose, that's harder than you can imagine, and come out the other side and smile, that's bravery. And that really hit me, really, really profoundly.
And you made your name by doing stuff solo, right? By being on your own, by having isolation, by being cut off from the rest of the world, which is why people would have described you as brave. Yet you've taken a bunch of young people and you've almost done the opposite with them, right? You've put them into an enclosed space. You've given them something they can't escape from. You've got them with a bunch of other young people as well. What do you think that experience of sailing might have done for them?
Well, first of all, it's not really about sailing. And you used 3 words there, and I was using them. It just maybe you were talking about confined space. It's not, it's freedom, because it's the sea, it's all there. I mean, I see the opposite. You see confined space. Yeah. I see, oh my, look at that world. It's all around. We can point the boat in any direction.
That's why you do what you do and I do what I do. I think.
Quite probably. But, and also, but 2 things. One is, although what you saw of what I did was me on my own, the reality is absolutely the opposite. You work with an incredible team of people to design a boat, to build a boat, to prepare a boat. You communicate with them whilst you're at sea. You really are with a team. And to such an extent that when I finished my second round the world and crossed the line, I felt nothing until I got on the boat, because we'd done it together. I hadn't done it on my own. And when they got on the boat, we could celebrate what we'd achieved, but me alone, nothing, really nothing. I felt deflated. Actually, relief, totally. It was incredible. But then when they got on the boat, it was euphoria. You could not have kind of changed things more.
I wonder why you felt deflated at that moment.
You're so exhausted. You've put everything in. You've made it, and you just sit down and you're just like, I can't believe I'm still here. I can't believe we've done it. It's just this relief, this overwhelming relief. And then we celebrated. And then it was euphoric. It was absolutely euphoric. It was a just amazing feeling. So that team, that's what we get on the Cancer Trust boats. You're with a group of people who get it. For me, having done the round the world, those team members, they got it. They really knew what had gone into it. They really knew how hard it was. Just the same as those young people on the boat. They get it. Everybody on the boat gets it. And just being amongst that group of people who really get it is so, so precious, because no one has to say anything, but if they do, it's understood.
So interesting. And I'm pleased that we've actually stumbled across this conversation about teamwork in a world where you've become famous for doing things solo, right? You're telling us that you haven't really. And teamwork is where all the magic lies, right, in this life. We've created a foundation from high performance because I believe that charity is so vital, but it's so hard. And you need so many people around you all the time. And that's where you come into this conversation, Frank, as the CEO of the Ellen MacArthur Cancer Trust. I'm really interested in getting the truth from you about what it's actually like running a charity, because Ellen can have this great idea. She can be moved by these young people. You can have this grand vision for how you want to help change the world. But then there's the daily grind of actually the demands of being in the charitable sector. What would you want us to understand about that?
So it is really hard, and it's particularly hard, at the moment, and it has been for, if you look back at all the things that have happened in the world in the last 5-10 years, every time you feel like the world's getting a little bit calmer, something else happens. But I think, just coming back to what I said at the beginning in the introduction, I think it is slightly different because it matters. Yeah. So I think if you, there's this vision that running a charity is really easy and we're all really gentle and we go in every morning and we have meditation and then we're all very nice to each other and, we'll leave at 3:00 and go home. And actually, I think charities are leaner and, are more focused than most businesses because we have to be. So for us, our big challenge is funding, because actually that's what makes the difference. If we have more money, we can work with more young people. So 12 young people today will hear the news that they have cancer, and there'll be 12 more tomorrow, and 12 more the day after that, and 12 more the day after that. And, the challenge for us, the first challenge for us is to raise the funds to be able to support those young people. And then there's lots of other challenges as well. And that's really helped by organisations like the Postcode Lottery. Their funding is unrestricted. That makes a real difference when people come to you and say, we trust you, we know that you know what you're doing, so we're going to support you, but we're not going to support you and tell you that you have to spend it on X or Y. Actually, we're going to leave you as the experts. there's a very famous analogy about, people want to buy, someone comes along to a charity and says, I want to do X. And I always use the tablecloth analogy, which is someone comes along and says, I want to buy you a tablecloth. And you're like, yeah, but I haven't got a table. Yeah, but a tablecloth looks really nice, so I'm going to give you a tablecloth. And they give you a tablecloth and they say, there's that funding, but it's restricted and you have to buy a tablecloth with it. And actually what you need is, you don't need the tablecloth, you need the table underneath. So, running charities is hard, but I think, charities make a difference. And when you make a difference, that gives you that motivation to work really hard at all of the little bits that build up and make it. And again, Ellen talked about team. Actually, it's all about team. We have an amazing team at the Ellen MacArthur Cancer Trust, but we also have an amazing team of volunteers. Volunteers like Josh. Josh was supported by us as a young person, but Josh is now a volunteer as an adult. And we have over 250 of those volunteers. We have a big team of about 24, 25 people. And it becomes a team effort, and that makes a really big difference.
Amazing. Well, look, I wanted to have this conversation because I believe, as I'm sure all three of you around this table do, that charity is what can make a genuine difference to people's lives, right? It's there when other people aren't and other services aren't. And from personal experience, Josh, how that feels. Would you tell us your story?
Yeah, so my story started that, I'd left school and got a job, and it was kind of what would consider the traditional path, what you thought, growing up and being an adult was, and, what the everyday success looks like from the outside. And then started to have some symptoms of issues in my leg, and then went to a specialist and then got referred to the specialist. And then at that point you start to think, crikey, this is probably not going to be, even if the best outcome is probably not going to be a good outcome. So, after significant tests and all of this...
Were you been poorly for a while? Or?
No, I was probably the fittest and most healthiest I'd been, but I had a growth within my hip and pelvis in my leg. So, it started to show it, and being kind of, 18, 19, I'd kind of thought, there's more important things like, next promotion at work, and that kind of life goals were more important. However, that kind of traditional view on what was important came crashing down. And then, diagnosed with synovial sarcoma, which is very rare, soft tissue cancer, and it all interweaving into my hip and into my bone in my leg, which, at the time I thought, this is quite, it's just quite unusual. Like, I'd never thought I'd be the person who got cancer. I never thought I'd be in that fight. And fight is a really bad way to put it, but there's no good way to put it. That fight for your own life, but everyone else on the outside is suffering more than you in some ways because they're seeing you go through it. And I think through my chemotherapy and that, which was quite brutal at times, I set myself 10 rules that, cancer won't define me. Things like I shaved my own head because I wasn't going to have the chemo make me lose my hair. I also had thing about always being kind to the staff. They don't want to be poking you and prodding you more than you need to be. So, always be kind. Even really small things like bringing in a box of donuts for the nurses, because actually they're watching you go through it. They're seeing you, suffer as well. They don't want you suffering, and they try and make it as easy as possible. So about being kind, and also some other ones around just not letting, no special diets. I found everyone and, all aunties, uncles and friends of the family that you haven't heard from that suddenly appeared going, oh, you need to try, I don't know, avocados every morning. They'll make you feel better. Actually, the challenge was just to eat, just to have enough to get through the day. And then, through chemotherapy and then radiotherapy every day at the hospital. And then again, you get focused so much on the day, just get through today, find the little joy in today. Like it might be a really bad day. You might feel really sick. And actually at points I couldn't be sick. It was just dry heaving for hours, which was, quite a testing on the resilience. And then, radiotherapy. And then I had very extensive surgery to salvage my leg. So, at the hospital, which was amazing surgeon, all that, very fortunate. And it was all through the NHS, so very fortunate to have that support there. And the surgeon gets the document and says the risk. And he says, if it goes well, you'll still have a leg. If it doesn't go well, your leg's coming off. And I was sitting there in the ward waiting, and it was an adult ward. And I was sitting there as, 19-year-old, and pretty much everyone on the ward of 12, everyone had surgery, and they were missing arms, missing legs. And I'm sitting there thinking, oh, crikey, this is, quite a serious thing. And then through surgery, I never expected, you think as a 3-year-old you learn to walk, but I was having to relearn to walk at the age of 18, 19, or 19, 20. And it's not something I'd ever put in my head. And, the waking up from surgery, there was about 20 doctors around him poking me, prodding me, telling me that they'd removed a 6 to 7 kilo tumour that had been interweaving in my nerves, within my arteries and veins. So, yeah, that was kind of then the rehabilitation post-surgery. It was all very much like, I know I have to get through today. If I get through today, there's tomorrow. And it was always about looking for tomorrow. However, then once you finish this treatment, you then just have this day and you go, well, what's tomorrow? There's no agenda. I'm not at hospital. I'm not anywhere else. And suddenly what had been your life for 6 months, a year, just stops. And then reality starts to then set in.
This is the element that I really want to talk about with you. I mean, for a start, we've had over 400 conversations, right, on high performance. And I'm often asked by people, what's the one thing that links together all of the people that have been on your show? And I say, they are optimists. Like, they are the light in the room. They believe that regardless of how hard a day is or how hard a week is or how bad the news is they've received, that they'll be okay, that they'll get through it. But they do it by spreading it to other people. They walk in this room, they walk into our production office, and when they're a guest on the show who've done incredible things because they just have that energy about them, and you have exactly the same energy. And I love hearing when you were in your darkest moment that you got your joy or your optimism from doing things for other people, which I think is such a great lesson for people listening to this. If you can be of service to others, it can remove so much of your own anxiety. But then for someone that hasn't been on the journey you have, I would think to myself, the moment that someone says you're all clear, that's just pure joy, and that joy never leaves you. I think it's really important that we talk about the fact that that's not actually always the reality. So let's go a bit deeper on this moment then. When you are given the all clear, it doesn't maybe feel like you thought.
Yeah, especially I think a lot of other people that I've spoken to don't actually get an all clear. They just go, the surgery was good, the margins were good, we'll see you in 3 months. There was never an all clear. There was no, you talked about that kind of feeling of deflated and there was no celebration for me. It was like, oh, okay, there's no big bell to ring for me. It was just, we'll see you every 3 months for the next 3 years. And then we'll see you for the next 5 years after that, every 6 months. And so there's never this, because it was so rare and so complicated, and the probability of it coming back was quite significantly high, probably higher than some other tumours, that, there was never an all clear for me. And it will always be there as something that may come back. And, through the surveillance and that, hopefully, it'll be picked up early if it did. So there was no euphoric party. And I hope other people do get that euphoric moment. But for me, it wasn't reality. Reality was, you're still in recovery. You then need to start building back your life, building back your confidence, finding who you are. Because suddenly what you thought, doesn't exist anymore. The values you had and what you thought success was, suddenly just comparing to nothing. Because it was about fighting the fight that no one ever wants to fight. And you don't choose to be it. But equally, for me, when it came, it wasn't something I was afraid of. It was about just looking forward and taking the days and taking the steps and trying to not show the suffering so then no one else had to suffer as much. And it's about just always being positive and looking forward. So there was no all clear. And still today, I see the surgeon regularly for checkups and it's all positive. But I also understand that when I first started my first chemotherapy, there was a amazing young lady who started it on the same day as me. And then, unfortunately, the prognosis for her wasn't as positive as mine was. And that's also a reality. Not everyone gets an all clear. And that's something that I think, it's easy to kind of feel there and say, oh, I got through it. But actually, you also need to remember that, I don't believe in luck, but my dice rolled that day, and through my treatment, it came out positive for me. And that's not always the case.
I think what Josh talks about at the end of treatment is something that we've heard so much, Ellen, over the last 23 years, which is actually for a lot of young people, the whole focus of their life during treatment is to get through treatment. So, if you're a boy and leukemia, that treatment might last for 3 years, or it might be shorter if you've got a solid or soft tumour. But actually, for that moment, all you focus on is, I have to get through treatment. I have to finish. I want to get through treatment. And actually, the reason the Ellen MacArthur Cancer Trust there, one of the reasons we're there, is so many young people get to the end of that and go, And, Josh and I've talked many times about this, and, we've seen it so many times. People get to the end and go, what do I do now?
Now what?
Yeah, exactly, Ellen. Now what?
As Josh was talking, I was thinking, when you're going through treatment, you have so much structure around you.
Yeah.
Structure physical in support from those close to you and the nurses and the doctors, but also structure from a diary perspective. You're going to be here then, you're going to be here then, you're going to be here then. And not just you, but your whole family working around that. And once your treatment ends, that structure doesn't completely fall away, but it starts to fall away because suddenly it's a big gap now until the next thing, or a big, and you've been so kind of driven is completely the wrong word, but you've been
Focused.
Focused. And everyone around you and family and friends, how's Josh? How's Josh? And actually not kind of so much, how are you, or what have you done today, or what did you do last weekend? It's almost the normal conversations. I've heard this so many times. They're just not there because everybody wants to focus on how Josh is doing. But what Josh wants is a bit of normality. Yeah. He wants to talk about the football or whatever he's interested in. It almost kind of takes you out of normality.
And is that what the trust did for you when you first got the opportunity to be with them, was a bit of normality, a chance to have different conversations in a different setting with maybe people that you could relate to?
Yeah, so I was supported by Young Lives versus Cancer, which is a great charity as well, and doing very different but similarly pathway aligned to Ellen MacArthur Cancer Trust. And my social worker, Laura, was coming to the end, and we did the mental health kind of well-being, and we looked into it, and she's like, you've had all your independence taken from you because suddenly, hospitals were picking your diary. You were then, my Christmas over, one of my Christmases during treatment was that, I had Christmas and Boxing Day at home. Then on the 27th of December, went into hospital to have some chemotherapy as an inpatient. And then I managed to come out just the day before my birthday in early January. And so then suddenly your diary is just dictated to by hospital, and you've lost all this independence and confidence. And then what was nice was Laura said, she said that, why don't you try this trip? And I was very much against doing a cancer club activity. I turned down other things. I wasn't willing to be defined by cancer. And Laura just said, what have you got to lose? You've been through enough. Your worst day at the on the Ellen MacArthur trip can't be as bad as the other days I've seen you have here. So why don't you just do it and see what happens? And from first meeting other young people, it was actually a sense of belonging, and you just check your cancer at the door because it's a known. Everyone's been there, everyone understands it, and everyone's journey is so different. But everyone understands that, you've had a rough ride, but actually you're still a human under there. And actually, your parents asking you how you're feeling every hour in case you're going to be sick is gone. It's suddenly this independence back of actually, I can help myself, I can meet new people, and I have a community that understands me, and that sense of belonging. I think I've never found it anywhere else.
Success isn't just about one big headline moment, right? It's about the thousands of small victories happening every single day. And that's what Postcode Lottery is all about. Just by playing, you're making a real impact across communities, whether it's a breakfast club helping kids start their day with the fuel they need to learn, a youth programme building confidence in young people, or mental health services supporting someone when they need it most. These are the moments that matter. These are the moments that make a real difference to real people. When you play the Postcode Lottery, you're not just supporting a lottery, you're helping fund these life-changing programs. You're part of a bigger movement of shared victories, of communities winning together. If you want to see how this funding is making a difference in communities, click the link in the description to learn more about powering hope together. Postcode Lottery manages lotteries for 20 charities. A minimum of 30% of each ticket price goes to charity. 18 plus conditions apply, not available in Northern Ireland. What do you see happening between the young people when you're observing them quietly on the boat?
I think the most incredible thing is seeing a young person arrive and leave. So you see a group of, not always, but often, introvert, quiet, unsure, not so much confidence, arrive, barely speaking or quietly speaking. 4 days later, when they leave, can't shut them up. It is unbelievable. They are so full of joy and life and laughter, and so often over the years, and we've been going well over 20 years now, we'll get a letter from a parent saying, thank you for giving us our son or daughter back.
Wow.
In less than a week. and because they found themselves again. And as Josh said, you see these young people step away, they step out of it. They cook on the boat, they clean, we're living on a boat together. The young people do the cooking. We do sailing, you can get involved or not. It's not about sailing, but the environment that exists on that boat with a group of young people in quite an intimate space really works. And some trips talk about the cancer, some trips don't. The outcome is irrelevant.
And do the young people decide what gets discussed?
Yeah,
Totally.
There's not someone on the boat going, now we're going to have our work.
And that's really important. There is no sitting around with beanbags talking about cancer. And I think what Ellen says and what you've picked up on, and Josh, I know you'll have a view on this, it's really important that young people decide. So, I've been on trips where, young people have had really important conversations. And I remember many years ago, I had my back to a group of young people. I was doing the washing up. And they were having a conversation about fertility, which is a big issue for young people after cancer treatment. And, they didn't need an adult in that conversation. In fact, the last thing they needed was an adult in that conversation, and definitely at the time, a 40-year-old man, now 50-year-old man involved. But actually, equally, I wanted to make sure they were all okay. So I had my back to them, and I spent an hour washing up one mug because I wanted to make sure they were okay. But I also wanted to leave them to have that conversation because they were having the conversation. They were all in their early 20s. They knew all the facts, but they needed to have a conversation with other people who really got it. But then equally, you'll have young people who come on a trip and they don't want to talk about their cancer. They want to talk about everything else. They want to, and that's led entirely by the young people. And that's incredibly important that is young person led, that actually our team don't make that happen or not make that happen. Actually, we just support young people to create this environment where they can decide. I don't know if you see that, Josh, when you volunteer now, or whether you felt that at the time, but
yeah, massively. And for me, it was about these conversations with other people. They understand you, and the trust is there as kind of a safety net that if it gets too much, there's always other, guidance and support that they can offer you and push you in the right directions. But, it's when you're sitting around having a cup of tea and you're sitting there sailing or something and someone starts to go, it might be something really benign. They'll start talking about a pain or something they're finding more difficult. And then suddenly it will open up into a conversation about different people's experiences with cancer, as well as also coping mechanisms and other things that they've found that might have worked. So for me, there was a conversation I had with someone who also had a sarcoma and they'd had surgery, and they were finding they had issues with their scar, and it was about rolling a tennis ball on it, which can help soften up the scar. I'm no medical expert either, so it worked for me. And, things like that, where you're talking about cancer, but, it's about other parts of you as well. And, I think it also most happens around Uno and things like that. There's all
Uno is a great opportunity to break down anything. I've had quite a few rows over Uno as well over the years, I'll be honest.
The rules.
You can't do that. Yes, you can. What Uno rules are you playing by? Yeah. I know also, because I've worked for a long time as a vice president of Young Lives versus Cancer, or Click Sergeant as it was before, and we would speak a lot about loneliness for people who are going through this journey. Over 80% of young people experience it. Did you? And was this trip a moment that really brought you back into the fold?
Yeah, I think loneliness is something that I definitely suffer from, and maybe not at the time because you're so engrossed in it. Friends, either I cut them off or just went vacant. And actually, you soon learn that actually most of the people in your life are, sounds awful, but passengers on a separate journey. And then the few core people are always going to be there. And very fortunate that, I had a really great best mate who lived overseas, flew in just to turn up to take me away for a couple of days and to kind of keep some kind of, young lad culture and kind of didn't give me a day's rest with the banter and things like that. So that was really important as well. But also it's struggled with relationships. Suddenly, my relationship at the time just fell apart because I was so focused on getting better and that. And it was like, actually, I have the energy to do one of these things fully, but I can't do both of them. So loneliness, and also, isolating yourself because you don't want to upset other people and bring other people in. And whereas on the trips, you suddenly find, well, actually, you've been through this, you understand it. You might have lost relationships or had tensions and things like that. And it's about, for me, what the trust does, what that first trip did, was to take you away from the cancer as well as, people saying about mental health, mental well-being. It also then gave me the courage to then, someone else talked about their struggles, gave me the confidence to then go back and say, actually, I think my mental health's been affected by it. And then also, look at it and then say, yeah, okay, I'm willing to now ask for help. Whereas I think before I never would have asked for help. I would have been like, okay, that's the cancer door shut, close the garage door, lock it up, and off we go. Life goes on. And then actually everything had changed, but I wasn't willing to admit it probably as much until I came on the trip. And so other people who had been through it and had taken themselves further than I was willing to take myself at the time.
Can we talk about mental well-being then? Because this is obviously incredible anecdotal evidence of a young person saying, I did it and it was really helpful. But I know as a charity, it's so important for you to evidence the impact that you have on young people, to document that evidence. Because again, people that are going to fund your work, they want to know that this genuinely works. So what data do you have that this makes a genuine difference to the lives of young people?
Yeah, so it's been a really important part of what we've done over the last 5 years. So I think if you go back before that 5 years, we had what I call vanity metrics. So we had a big tagline that said rebuilding young people's confidence. So we'd bring young people down for 4 days. We'd put them on a boat that said rebuilding young people's confidence on it. We had it written on the wall where they did the welcome. It was written on all of our clothing. And then at the end of the week, we'd ask them, have we rebuilt your confidence? And surprise, surprise,
they'd say yes.
98% of them said, yes, we've rebuilt your confidence. And it was a completely, it had no basis.
No scientific
basis. And it didn't teach us anything, it didn't tell us anything. So
But you felt it.
Yeah, you did feel it.
You knew it.
You knew it, but you couldn't prove it.
If you could touch it, you knew it.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
It sounds like, because you could feel, the first trip you could feel it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Immediately.
Yeah, so you could feel it, but you couldn't prove it. No, you're absolutely right, Ellen.
It's important.
It is really important. So, and if you brought a funder down and you showed them it, they'd get it. But you couldn't prove it. So about 5 years ago, we started to think about, actually, one, we need to prove this, but also we need to improve it. So we do slightly different types of trips, and we do trips up on the west coast of Scotland in Largs, and we do trips in Cowes, and then we do some other trips all around the country. And we didn't know whether our trip that we were running here in this way was any better than what we were doing here and what we could learn from this. So we've been for the last 5 years using something called the Warwick Edinburgh Wellbeing Scale, which is an academically rigorous tool, and it's used by lots of people all around the country. And you have to use it under license, and you have to do things in a very specific way. But that actually measures, it was created by Warwick and Edinburgh University. That actually measures the improvement that you are making or not making in young people's well-being. And so we see, an average improvement. 72% of young people improve their well-being, most of them by about 12%. But what's really interesting for us is now we've got 5 years data, we can now look at it and go, what we're doing here, we're seeing a difference here from here, and it allows you to be curious. And you're right, Ellen, you can feel it, but as we've grown, it's not possible for us to be everywhere at once. So what we're now able to do is to look at this data and go, why are we seeing that? Why are we seeing that this is having more of an effect on this bit of well-being because we've got enough data now? And what could we change up here, or what could we do differently? So we use this Warwick Edinburgh Wellbeing Scale, and we can really see the difference, and we can use that, one, to improve what we're doing, and secondly, to prove what we're doing. And actually, we see a sustained impact. So we actually go back and we ask people the same, we use the same tool 3 months later, and we are still seeing a positive effect 3 months later, which for an intervention that lasts 4 or 5 days is actually very unusual.
So valuable.
And the other thing we did with that data is we were completely transparent. So we have a live dashboard where that data goes up. So Ellen MacArthur Cancer Trust.org/impact. And anyone can go and see the data. And we don't touch the data. So it goes straight there. And anyone can go and dig in, and you can filter it, and you can see the difference. And I think that being transparent about the difference you're making, and not just having those vanity metrics that make you feel good but don't prove anything and don't show anything, is really important. But yeah, you could feel it, Ellen, you're absolutely right. It's not that we've changed what we're doing, we've just changed how we're measuring it and how we're making sure that we're still making that impact year on year. And what if we twist this a little bit? What if we do this slightly differently? Can we improve it? And we can try that here and then compare it to what we're doing here. And that really allows you to keep improving what you're doing.
Well, that is another key tenet to high performance, right? The idea of constantly exploring, wanting to be proved wrong, realizing that what looked great a week or a day or a month ago might not look great in a day, a week or a month, and celebrating the fact that you're evolving all the time. And I think it is really important when we talk about charities in this way, that it's not a case of them helping you to do things slightly better or slightly differently or allowing more people to come on trips. It's like, this stuff doesn't happen without funding, without the money. I love that you've stumbled across something that is totally different. And I've sort of felt like all my years in charity, I'd seen everything you can offer young people. As soon as I read a few weeks ago about your trust, I was like, now this is doing something totally different. So we should just call out the Postcode Lottery and really be clear about what they've actually allowed you to do.
I was just going to say, it's been a really long-term relationship with the Postcode Lottery. I mean, when we started off working together, it was sailing clothing and a van. Now it's truly game-changing.
Everything great starts small, right?
But we've grown with them.
Yeah.
They would only just set up here in the UK, and we've got to know them very well over the years. But that funding is utterly game-changing. As Frank said, core funding is so hard to get. Everyone will support, well, not everyone, but it's easier to get funding for a shiny project. But just to run the organisation, which is behind all of the measurements, all of the metrics, getting the young people on the water, what we do is harder to fund. And that funding underpins everything we do. It's our insurance policy. It enables us to plan for next year in a way that without that, we just couldn't.
And we've done some really exciting projects because of it. So we have a base now on the west coast of Largs. And we would never have opened that base on the west coast of Largs without Postcode Lottery. That was the big, they'd done some really great support of us in some quite small ways. As you say, everything great starts small. And then actually we were taking young people from, Glasgow, Edinburgh, Inverness, and we were putting them on an aeroplane, flying them across some of the best sailing in the country on the west coast of Scotland, bringing them down to Southampton, to then put them on a bus, to then put them on a ferry, to then put them on another bus to get them to our base in Cowes on the Isle of Wight. It was madness. But we would never have opened our base in Largs if it hadn't been for Postcode Lottery. And the other thing that we've done with them, Josh talked about the fact that when he went in for surgery, he didn't know whether he would come out with his legs still in place. And I'm very pleased, Josh, you had such a great outcome. But we have lots of young people who have external prosthetics because actually, very sadly, the first way to treat a sarcoma is surgery. And actually the most effective way, sadly, is is surgery for a sarcoma, particularly in young people. So we have lots of young people who have external prosthetics. And actually through the Postcode Lottery, we now have 2 yachts that we have adjusted quite specifically for young people with those needs of being able, how do they step on and off a boat with a prosthetic leg? How do they get around the boat with a prosthetic arm?
On their own.
Absolutely, Ellen, 100%.
Which is crucial.
Absolutely. And there's no, in the past it was like people would have to help them. And, that's not what they want. That's not what we're about. That's not what we do. It's so important, Ellen.
It's about what you can do, not what you can't. So maximising what you can do.
Yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely maximising what you can do.
And how are you doing today?
Yeah, I think that's a really tricky question in truth. That I think I'm in a good place. I think that, coming back as a volunteer gives new purpose to what I do in life as well and gives new energy. I think the lessons learned through both the trust as well as through my life's journey kind of leaves me in a strong place. And I think, looking forward, it's about, sailing with the trust, Ellen MacArthur Trust, in a few weeks in the Isle of Wight, which is going to be great. Again, coming back as a volunteer. And as Ellen said, you take these young people on the day one, the bus is quiet. Coming back on the Thursday or Friday, you're there as a volunteer, trying to have a half-hour sleep between service stop. You're like, they've not stopped talking. And I think, if you'd be willing, why don't you come down for a day as well? Come down and see the magic. We talk about it, but I think as well from donors' perspectives that, it's easy to look at the brief and go, crikey, they do an amazing thing. Yeah. Until you sit there on a boat and you could just sit there at the back, not say anything all day and just sit there having cups of tea at the back of the boat, and then you'll see the magic for yourself. I think if you've got time in the summer,
Sounds amazing.
I think you should do it. And, I'm sure it's easy to make happen. And yeah, see the magic for
Just
yourself.
don't let me fall in, guys.
You won't fall in.
I'm not the best swimmer.
You won't fall in.
Yeah. Your questions earlier. You'll be all cooked up on a boat.
Exactly. I'll stay inside.
Yeah.
Did you have something you want to say?
I just think when Josh talks about coming as a volunteer and he's coming back to sail with the Cancer Trust, I think there's something really, really important that I've witnessed in that when we started, young people would come on the boat and they would be with young people and adult volunteers, doctors and nurses and sailors, like Frank and I skippering the boats. What we now have is volunteers who are adults who had cancer as a child. Now, kids with cancer or young people with cancer, they meet other young people with cancer, but they don't meet adults that had cancer as a child. Yeah. And just being able to look forward and go, there's Josh. He was where I was. Look at Josh now. That just with no words, it says so much. And that's something only as you mature as an organisation you're able to do and see the benefits of.
Yeah. Man, that's so cool. I can see your passion as well as you talk about it and what it means to you.
And about 4 years ago, for the first time, we had a boat and I watched it go, and I have to be honest, it was quite emotional. The skipper was an adult who'd had cancer as a young person. The medic on board was an adult who'd had cancer as a young person. And the crew leader was an adult who'd had cancer as a young person. And there were 5 young people on that boat. And honestly, I feel emotional even talking about it now. It's like, that is what it's about. It was 8 people going off, and they weren't confined because it doesn't feel confined, but they were going off and they were together and they'd all been through the same thing and they all understood that. And the power of that, the power of bringing people together who've been through the same experience, able to share it, we've seen it. It makes such a difference.
The work you're doing, all 3 of you and everyone else involved in the trust, is incredible. To bring things to a close, with everything that you've learned, whether it's in your period as an elite sailor, making headlines around the world, or the dark times or the bright times, or in your period helping to grow this trust, from all the things that you've learned over your years on this incredible planet, what would you say is high performance to you?
So I thought about this because it's sort of, the questions coming, don't you? I was listening to people's answers to this. I become intrigued. I don't think it's about, I think it's about enabling other people. So for me, high performance is when the young people I interact with at the Ellen MacArthur Cancer Trust, enabling them. It's about the team that I work with, and I include in that the 250 volunteers. It's about enabling them. Before we started, we were chatting about being a dad. It's about enabling my kids. I mean, they're both adults now, but enabling them. So for me, high performance is about enabling other people to get to where they wouldn't have got without your help. And that would be my definition of high performance.
I love it. Ellen?
Mine's simple. I think my definition of high performance is putting the most you possibly can into life to get the most you possibly can out of it.
Amazing.
I think for me, it's about having the purpose to drive on, even in adversity and with resilience, as well as being ruthlessly kind.
Oh, what a way to end. Listen, thank you so much for your time, for sharing so much with us. I'm so proud of the work that the Postcode Lottery is enabling you to do and the lives that you're changing. And thank you very much.
Thanks for giving us the time.